My name is Celeste Perillas. I am the Program Manager for National Neighbors Silver, and we'd like to welcome you all to our webinar on building relationships and developing leaders. Just to give you an overview of National Neighbors Silver, it's a program that empowers, supports, and organizes older adults throughout the United States. We may have some folks on the webinar that are new to National Neighbors Silver or new to NCRC, so if you're new to this, welcome. If we have some more seasoned organizers from the NNS program, we welcome you back. Just to give you a little bit more of an overview of the program, NCRC, through this program, is applying our expertise in housing, credit opportunity, and policy advocacy to the education and empowerment of older adults. And our National Neighbors Silver, this is widely replicable in a variety of community and institutional settings. Organizers at our National Neighbors Silver site have been strategically selecting and training ambassadors to go about organizing and educating older adults about issues of financial security. And we're going to be sharing some of those best practices on this webinar today. We have a couple of presenters on our call today that we are really excited about having. Kristen Kumpf, who is the trainer and consultant at the Midwest Academy, is going to be talking to us about building relationships and developing leaders. If you don't know about the Midwest Academy, it is a national training institute for social action organizations to develop community organizing skills and progressive strategy. Previously, Kristen served as the Associate Organizing Director at Interfaith Worker Justice, where she trained and organized a national network of worker centers and religion labor groups, as well as serving as the national organizer of the New Sanctuary Movement. She's also worked as a community organizer in the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights and received her master's in social work from St. Louis University. And then we're also very excited to have Tom Endres, who's a consultant with the National Council on Aging, joining us as well. He'll be talking about specifically building relationships and organizing, how that relates to older adults in this field. He's a nationally recognized leader in human, organizational, and community development, and has played major roles in developing national and community service programs, most frequently focused on human capital and the potential inherent in aging society. He leads the National Council on Aging strategy for volunteering and service research demonstration programs, including respectability, multi-generational civic engagement, and wisdom works, which he'll be talking about a little bit later today. So to Kristen and Tom, thank you for joining us on our webinar. I'm going to go over our learning objectives, and then Kristen is going to start us off. We're going to be, in this webinar today, providing an overview of the importance of the one-on-one meeting in developing leaders to carry out successful organizing campaigns. And we'll also discuss how to properly identify leadership and the role that self-interest plays in leadership development and leadership identification. And then we'll also highlight the benefits that older adults can bring into the community organizing setting. So we're really excited to have Kristen lead us off on the first couple of objectives on our webinar. Kristen?
Great. Thank you, Celeste. Well, hello, everyone. It's an honor to be with you this afternoon. And I've been an organizer, as Celeste said, for quite a while. And during that tenure, I've had some chance to work with older adult populations, who I find some of the most exciting and sort of stimulated folk out there to go out and do some really good work in the world and in our communities. So it's fun to be able to be with you today and to really have this chance to think through, how are we, recruiting and developing leaders in our work. And I think that the mission that you all are working around of how are we, how are we looking at, issues of economic security and how are we supporting, folks who have, given a lot of their lives to helping others in the world. How are we making sure that they are taken care of and that we are building strong, communities of older adults. I think, one of the questions that comes up for people, when I've been out meeting with folks in the field is, gosh, we think that we've created this really great event, or we get really excited about doing this really, interesting meeting, and then we can't get people to show up, or we found someone who thought would be a really good leader. We've met with them, sometimes they've come to a few of our events, and then they just disappear, and we don't know what's happened. And so I think, we wanted to just talk through today, what does that mean to actually think about, how do we find people who could be really good and good leaders in our organizations, and that it is a process, I think, both around how do we find good people, but then also how are we developing good people? We want to make sure that today we lay out some tools for you to be able to take back to the work that you're doing, and also have some space for some questions and dialogue. So there's going to be a couple times, where there actually is going to be some space for both you all to think this through together, and for if you want to ask some questions, of me or of each other, there'll be space for that. In addition, we'd love for you to be thinking about sharing your stories of when you've actually been able to identify a really excellent leader. What happened? How did that happen? When you were able to do a really good meeting, what happened with that? So, start thinking about that as we're talking through this presentation, because we really do want to hear from you all, and so that you all can be learning from each other as well as learning from those of us presenting today. So, we want to start off with, I think often when we think about recruitment, we need help. We need help to do this work. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. So, we feel like, we've got some really important, things that we want to do, and that, that there's, often, whoops, what just happened? Okay, great. There we go. So, we think that, when in the work that we're doing, we really feel like, that our goal is to go out there and find good people and bring good people into doing this work with us. But that, I think what happens is that in our sort of our frustration and our excitement, or, even our desperation sometimes, that giving off this signal of, we need your help, help us, come help us, ends up being the wrong way to recruit. And so I want to ask us to consider looking at it from a different direction today. That while we do need help for our work, while we need to find some good leaders, and I think that many of you are working around a model where you're trying to find a core group of 5 organizers to really help you move this work, that maybe we can be more effective in identifying good people if we don't go at it from the perspective of, we need you to help us. We need you to come and do this. So, we want to first just start with, why do people get involved in this? And I want to ask you the question of, when you think about the first time that you volunteered for something, go to your own personal experience, and it could be, volunteered for, some organization or something in your church or something in your you, said that, when you think back about when you volunteered to get involved in something, that you did it because the first person to ask you was someone that you knew. And I think that's often what we find, when we look at, why people get involved, is that the person who is that usually there is a person who asks you, who is someone that you know and respect. And so I think, that is just something for us to keep in mind, that there is, when we think about, people getting involved, we all know, that the first piece of it comes because there is somebody who we know, who asks us. So then I think there is that next step of, you may be asked, but then why would you say yes to something? So when you think about, why you first said yes, I mean, you could have said no to that person, that there is this whole idea of, goal number 2, here we go, that there could be any number of reasons why somebody ends up saying yes. So think again back to that thing that you volunteered for, and then think through maybe some of the different reasons why you would have you said yes to that person. Was it that whatever they were asking you to do, that there was something that benefited you directly, or maybe you knew someone who's going to be affected by the issue. Maybe you just wanted to know more about the community, or you just wanted to get out of the house and meet new people and get involved in some way. So look at the you can pick more than one. Feel free to pick more than one, as many of you are, and just pick what applied to you when you thought about that first time that you said yes, when someone asked you to volunteer for something, why you said yes. So what's interesting to me as people are finishing up voting is that there's a wide spread of answers, and that for many of you, that you picked more than one, and that there were multiple reasons that you said yes. But that definitely, I mean, some of the bigger, top answers, I mean, that, again, that you really liked the person who was asking, so you said yes because the person was asking you, or, that you wanted to learn more about the community, or you knew people who'd be affected by the issue. But I think the point here is that there are many reasons why we choose to get involved, but that the 2 main reasons that people end up joining to do something as a volunteer is because, number one, someone asked them, and usually it's someone that they know at least a little bit and they respect somewhat. And number two, it meets their self-interest. And so this concept of self-interest is what we want to spend some time, getting into for the rest of our time here. And that oftentimes that's a word that can freak people out. That what is this idea of self-interest and what does that mean? And when we look at sort of this spectrum, that is in front of us with these funny pictures, I mean, clearly, we do not want people, operating out of selfishness. We all know that selfishness is not a good thing. We sometimes we all have our moments of selfishness, but we know that we shouldn't be, when we're out in the world, operating out of a place of selfishness. So sometimes, and I think this especially happens a lot, we've been trained, to be good people who care about our communities and our brothers and sisters and the people in the world around us. And we hear the concept of selflessness thrown around, that we really need to try and live up to this. We need to be a person who gives of ourselves to others and is learning to be selfless. And I think there's a lot of things that happen when there is, we are trying to attain selflessness. And when I've been in conversations with people, I often hear folks refer to Mother Teresa as someone who really exemplifies selflessness. But I think, a few things can happen. One is that, there really is, at the end of the day, I mean, not a real sustainable concept of selflessness. But I think even if you had asked Mother Teresa, I mean, that she got something out of the work that she did. I mean, and whether it was, it was just something that was deeply fulfilling for her and for her life. I mean, I think that she would probably talk a little bit about her faith and what that meant for her and her faith. But that at the end of the day, she was tied up in the work that she was doing. It wasn't just about her constantly giving of herself and ignoring who she was completely. And I think if we, when we call people to sort of, try and, attain a sense of selflessness, that we end up getting burnt out and we end up getting frustrated because, we forget that we are people, who are connected into the world, and we do have, things that we want for ourselves and for our family and for our, the people that we are. And so I think this idea, literally the word self-interest literally comes from the Latin word inter esse, which means to be among. And so self-interest is this concept of self among others. What does it mean to be a person that is part of larger structures, that we are part of a family structure, we're part of a community structure, we're part of a demographic structure. And so when, I think part of it is that we have a job as people who are working with folks in communities to say to people, it's okay to want to, not only you want something for yourself and your family, but, how does what you want for yourself and your family connect with other people and their families in your community? So if you are scared that you're not going to have enough money to retire, or you're seeing, you have to make a decision between, buying medicine and buying food, guess what? Your neighbor may be feeling that as well. That other people in your community might be feeling that as well, and that, wouldn't you like to work together to make sure that you can have enough money to buy both, and so can your neighbor, and so can other people in your community. So that's what this idea of self-interest is. And when we look at it, I mean, self-interest really varies. I mean, there are lots of different types of self-interest for people. And sometimes it is like, my self-interest could be, that I don't have enough money. And so therefore, like, I'm really concerned about, am I going to be able to, buy all that I need? And that, if what is someone's self-interest around working for a particular policy or working for, we want to, protect Medicare, I'm going to directly benefit from that. But sometimes people's self-interest in being involved in an organization might be more than just I'm affected by the issue. It might be I'm really lonely and I really want to find a community of interest, some people I can, spend time with. Or my self-interest is that, I'm retired now from being a graphic designer, and I'd really love to be able to use my graphic design skills to do something else, to really help people in the world instead of, just feel like I've got no way to use my talents now, right? And so sometimes it may just be, I want to, get to know, be knowing what's going on in the community. I want to, sort of feel like I'm the hub of energy and attention. Sometimes it may just be I'm coming to these organizational meetings because, hey, there's good food. So I think ultimately, we don't know what someone's self-interest is until we can figure it out. But the self-interest of any individual person varies. And so one of the questions is, how do we really, figure out like what self-interest means and why, and frankly, in our work, why should we care about it? And ultimately, I think one of the main reasons that we care about what a person's self-interest is that self-interest is the motivation out of which we act. That we are all driven by different things. And I often say, what is that thing that's in your gut? What is it that makes you want to get up in the morning and do things throughout the day? So what is your gut emotion? And what drives you? What drives you? What do you want to do? What do you want to see change? What do you want to grow about yourself or do in the world? And so that ultimately, when we think about trying to recruit people to our organizations, that it's really important to realize that every person is moved out of something. And that thing that moves people is this whole idea of self-interest. So I wanted at this time to turn it over to Tom, and I know Tom's going to share a little bit about when we think about self-interest of older adults, what that looks like. What does that mean, for people, and just some thoughts for us to think about. Tom?
Hi, thanks, Kristen. Hi, everybody. It remains that the best way to recruit older adults is to ask them. So there's really a real coming together here of various interests. So when you ask older adults what it is they want to do in a large scale through research that we've done, first of all, they're very much interested about the future. They're interested in helping children, families, helping communities grow stronger. And they're also interested in the present. And one of the things about the present is that there are just growing numbers of older adults, 9,000 people turning 65 every day today. And so one of the concerns and self-interests of older adults is having a high quality of life and dignity in later life. So the present, from a self-interested point of view of older adults, is helping other older adults achieve what they want. And that's the ability to live in community and to live with dignity and have a healthy, long life. So the interests, self-interests of older adults and the ways in which organizers recruit leaders are very much aligned today. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more later.
Great. Thank you, Tom. So then the question becomes, how do we find out what someone's self-interest is? All right, we get it. We get that we, as human beings, we all have what, this deep thing in our gut that we care about. We all want to see things for ourselves and our families and our communities. And so if we are doing this work, if you all are out there, trying to recruit older adults into your work, how do you figure out what someone's self-interest is? And so one of the tools we wanted to talk about today is this whole idea of one-on-one meetings. That the best way that I have found through a lot of years in organizing to really be able to sit down with someone and to figure out what it is that drives them, what it is that moves them, what do they care about, is this concept of a one-on-one meeting. So when we look at what does a one-on-one meeting look like? That first of all, there is some intention around it. It is a meeting. It's more than just I'm passing by and I'm going to quickly talk to you real quick. Or you can't really do a one-on-one meeting over the phone. I think this picture is perfect. View. Maybe it's you've decided we're going to meet for a half an hour in the park and sit down and talk, or you've set up a 45 minutes, we're going to go get coffee or tea together. But there is some intentionality around this conversation, and it's more than just I'm going to I want to get to know you because I think you might be an interesting person, but that it is an intentionality around I want to get to know you, and I want to know you to know a little bit about me and the work that I do, so that we can figure out, is there a way that we can connect? Is there a possible connection here? And so in the one-on-one meeting, the one-on-one meetings are really a lot about storytelling. And I think that this is why, for me, some of the richest one-on-one meetings I've ever done have been with older adults, because as we all know, older adults have the best stories, have the most incredible stories to share about their lives and about their dreams and about what they want to see happen in the world. So the goal of a one-on-one meeting is to really learn what motivates this person. What has their story been? What have been their past experiences? What's their life looked like? And what are their hopes now? What do they want to see their life look like now? And then ultimately, as you're getting, having folks share these stories, and you're listening to, what they really are passionate about, that's what you want to be gleaning. You want to be drawing out of them, like, what are they passionate about, and how what they're passionate about might connect to the issues that you're working on. So if you are working on economic security, and they start talking about, times in their past, maybe they lived, through the Great Depression or after the Great Depression, and frustration around seeing, people being poor, or they've fought their whole life just to make sure that they have a small savings account. And, whatever that conversation is, how do you, sort of in the back of your mind, make a mental note of that. So like that, okay, there's a way that this person is really going to understand what the issues are that we're working on and why those issues are important. And so figuring out how the issues you're working on connect with them and their lives and their values. What is their dream for themselves and for their friends? What do they care about? What do they, how do they want to see their world look different? And then ultimately, I think the core piece of the one-on-one meeting is, how can you help them live that out? connect with their self-interest and connect with then, that you're issuing an invitation and helping them take action around what they're passionate about. So guess what? If they are passionate about, they really wish that they didn't have to choose between, buying medicine or buying food, that's exactly what you're working on. And that this is what, you found from other people all over their neighborhood, and there's something that they can do about it. And that here's how you're inviting them to do this, not just because, you assume that may be something as an older adult that they could care about, but because they have just shared stories with you that you can relate to them. That's so beautiful. I think it's tremendous that you've been able to really, do that or experience that. And this is why, we're fighting so hard, to see these things happen in our community. So when you think about doing that, and this whole idea of, recruitment, I wanted to share with you a few steps, and then we can have a short conversation before we move on to the next piece. About what you might want to be thinking about. The first thing I think is you really obviously want to be as prepared as you can before you start meeting with people. I think this is often something that we do naturally, but as much as we can figure out anything that we can find out about the person, if we are going door knocking in a certain community, what do we know about that community? Who have been the leaders in that community? Who have they identified as who's the house that like everybody wants to go to, or who's the woman that takes banana bread to everybody when they're sick? So what do we know about who in the community are the movers and shakers, and what have they done? Have they been active in their church? How much information can we gather ahead of time so that we know the kinds of questions to ask them and stories to draw out of them. Then there's this piece around, I think while a one-on-one often is a lot of you asking them questions and stories, you don't want this to be an interview. This isn't just you pulling out all this information from them and not offering anything of yourself. So you really want to share a little bit about who you are and why the work is important that you're doing. How did you first get involved in working with older adults? Why is this work important for you? And then be able to really, make sure that you identify who you are in the organization in a way that will be helpful for them. Again, you want to listen for self-interest and really make sure that you're asking the kinds of questions and stories that will get at that. And then ultimately, you want to make sure you issue an invitation. I think it's one of the most frustrating experiences is if you're having great conversation, you've really gotten them excited and jazzed up about something, and then there's no next step. So make sure that you have a clear next step, even if the clear next step is, we're going to have this potluck dinner and we'd like you to just come and see what we're about. So something that, gives people an opportunity to come see or get involved. And we're going to talk later about sort of entry-level activities for folk. But make sure that there is at least an invitation and that you can get some sort of a commitment from them. And the commitment, I think, should be also followed with, how are you going to follow up? So, can I call you next Monday to make sure you're still okay to come on Tuesday? And by the way, do you need a ride? Would that help you out? How can I help you stay committed, to this idea of taking some action around this thing that we're passionate about? So ultimately, I just want to leave us with, people are busy and have many ways to use their time, even older adults. I think there's often this myth that, that older adults have all the time in the world, and that, as you all know, that's not often true, that there are some people that have some time, but ultimately, I think, people have many opportunities to be able to use their time and their energy. And so how can your work connect with someone personally? How can your work be something that will be meaningful for them and inspire them to want to take action? So let's just open it up at this point for just some questions or comments. And in particular, if any of you have had very, very successful opportunities to do a one-on-one meeting or to identify someone who you feel like you were able to meet with someone and able to recruit them and bring them in, I'd love to hear just a couple stories from folks about a successful time that you were able to recruit someone and bring them in. Or if people have any questions about the idea of self-interest or one-on-one meetings, this would also be a good space to ask those.
I think we may have Jimmy or Jeff Engelbrecht from ESOP that may have some things to offer here.
Yes, hi, this is Jimmy from ESOP in Cleveland. Our computers, our wireless is down, so I'm joining via phone, but I've been following along, and so I'd love to share with everyone a brief story about our leadership development in our project in Cleveland. And Kristen, when you were talking and you talked about recruitment and self-interest, our initial leader of the for our ambassador for the NNS was the ESOP homeowner who came through ESOP as a homeowner now 3 years ago. And her self-interest was saving her home, so she clearly aligned herself with ESOP for social service. But then afterwards, she was adamant about staying involved with ESOP and offered opportunities to help and volunteer, but we never were able to really tap into her self-interest. So she would come and volunteer or speak at an event, but we could never build anything around her. And then with the NNS project, we were able to do a one-on-one with her and find out about transportation and the issue of transportation in the community for herself, who's an older adult, but also for her mother, who she takes care of, who's in her 90s. And, you know, really through that one-on-one and talking to her and finding out about the access to transportation in other neighborhoods that isn't available in her neighborhood and why that is. And so we've been able to successfully recruit her and then use her to recruit others in her community that run block clubs, that own businesses, that are on boards of churches. All throughout this one-on-one that we had with her, that's someone that has been involved for 3 years that we've never been able to tap into.
That's such a great story, Jimmy. Thank you for sharing. And what I love about what you just said is that after you were able to really, you know, spend some time with her and tap into her self-interest, that she's been able to then go back out and recruit other folk and to do one-on-one meetings with other people. And I think that the point of this is that, you know, some of the healthiest and most successful organizations I've seen is where they literally have these rolling one-on-ones where people, you know, there's never a time where you stop doing them. It's not like, okay, we've recruited the right number of people, now we're done, right? But that you know, that they should be an integral part of how you're developing your organization and continue to develop. And we're going to talk about that in a minute when we get more into leadership development. But that I think it's not just about you as the organizers or as the staff doing them to recruit people in, but having leaders do them with each other and having leaders bringing in new leaders. I think that's, you know, and again, older adults love conversations. They love to have people tell stories. They love to share their own stories. And so I think, you know, training people to do one-on-one meetings can be a really exciting way to invigorate your organization, just the way that you all have. That's fantastic.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. And just so you know, after we found our initial ambassadors, Jeff and myself both weekly have goals to schedule one-on-ones ourselves, then also goals for our leaders and ambassadors to schedule as well, so that we keep, you know, refreshing ourselves and keep finding new and potential people. So I agree completely.
Fantastic, fantastic. Good luck. Good. Anybody else have any questions or stories they want to share at this time? All right, well, why don't we let this sit for a minute. Let's move on to this next short piece. So then one of the things is, as you know, Judy was just saying, that it's important, you know, to keep that up and to be, you know, really think about how are we developing leaders, and this whole idea of, you know, keeping up the energy and the commitment of an organization. But I think there's nothing more important than leadership development. And I think often what happens is we get so busy and caught up in our day in, day out work and all the things we're trying to accomplish that we don't spend enough time thinking about how we're developing leaders. And so suddenly, one of our most successful leaders may end up quitting. And we think, oh gosh, what happened there? And so I think, you know, really spending time and energy up front thinking about how are we bringing in new leaders and developing leaders is really, really important to the success of our organization. So in this model, here's sort of this you can kind of just tell that there's circles of participation. I want you just to think for a second about the overall structure of your organization. And sort of, are there varying levels? I think in most of our organizations, even if we don't naturally think about it, there are different levels of participation. So this far out level, and the number is pretty big, you know, again, it may look very different depending on the size of your organization, are who are the people that the only contact with us they have are maybe they're on our listserv. So maybe they get, you know, our quarterly newsletter, our monthly newsletter, maybe they get, you know, our e-newsletter. You know, maybe they, you know, get a phone call from us once a year to, you know, to participate in a call-in day. So who are those people that, you know, at least we know for some reason that they're interested? Maybe we, you know, knocked on their door once and they signed up, but they're way out there, sort of on the edge of our farthest out circle, right? Then we move into the next level, and this level is sort of, these are the folks who are occasionally engaged. So they may come to, you know, our annual fundraiser, or they may come to an annual lobby day, or maybe they show up, you know, once every couple of years, you know, sort of out of the blue, they'll come to an event or something that we're doing. But at least they have moved from just being on our listservs to actually coming and being engaged in the work that we're doing occasionally at some point. And then the next level is one that is really thinking about who are the people that are much more active. Now, these are maybe the folk that they come, you know, maybe you have a monthly meeting and they may actually show up every other month or occasionally. But for some reason, they've decided they really want to come and be more involved with who you are, right? And then the final circle, and this may be your circle of ambassadors or your circle if there's, you know, depending on what your key leadership structure is, but these are the people who are at the core of the work that you're doing. And these are not necessarily just the staff, but these are the folks who have volunteered their time and energy and have at some level said, yes, I want to be a leader. And so the question I would ask you all is sort of how do you get there? How does someone come in? They've signed up through your listserv, or you've knocked on their door. You find out they're interested in the work that they're doing. How do they move from an outside circle to an inside circle in your work? Do they just jump straight into one of the middle circles? How do we get people to be more involved and be leaders in our organization? And I think that sometimes we feel like, okay, we haven't found our ambassadors yet, or we haven't found people who can come and attend our events. We just don't have enough people coming. We got to go out and find new people. And while I think there often is some sense that we need to find new people, and I think we should always be finding new people to participate in our work, I would encourage you to think about who are people who are somewhat already connected that perhaps with a little time and care you could move to being more active leaders in your organization. So how do you get the people, especially in that second circle, the 10 to 100, how do you get the people who maybe show up once a year or every few months but aren't really active to be more active? Because obviously they care, or they wouldn't ever come to your event. So is there a way for them to become the more active leadership? And maybe, frankly, at the end of the day, maybe even one of your ambassadors or the very tight leadership in the center. How can those people be developed into deeper leaders? So I think one of the things you need to think about is how do leaders get skills, and how do leaders actually get the skills to be a leader? And I'm sure we all define leadership differently, and that might be an interesting thing when we get to the conversation part of this conversation. How do you define leader at your organization? What does it mean to be a leader? And are there many opportunities to be leaders? Because I think the healthiest organizations have different levels of leadership and levels for people to sort of move on up, and for people to kind of think about how am I moving into being more of a leader in this organization, right? And as part of doing that is that we need to be thinking about how are we developing the skills of leaders, and we're going to talk in a second about what that could look like. But how do people feel like, oh wow, now I'm suddenly a leader? And that part of that is this planning, action, reflection cycle. And that we need to be thinking about how are we planning for someone to become a leader? How does someone get a chance to act on becoming a leader and live that out? And then the part that we almost always miss is the space for reflection. That people need a space and a time to be able to say, all right, so, Georgette, you did such an incredible job last night at the meeting, signing everybody in and going around and making sure that everybody had name tags and talking to people. What did you learn? What did you like about doing that? Did you meet anybody interesting? Did you hear any interesting stories? Would you like to do that again? Is there something else that you would like to do? So making sure that there's a chance for reflection, to really talk with people and find out how do they feel about being a leader in the work that you're doing. What else would they like to do in the organization? And so really, sticking close to the sense of you need to plan something out for somebody so people know that they're actually being developed as a leader, but they know that they're being engaged. And then people need to act that out, and then there ultimately needs to be space for reflection. And so when we think about this, and what does it mean to be developing leaders, I would really encourage you to think about who are the core leaders you're going to develop, and then can you be developing leadership development plans for them? And so when you think about new leaders, how do you recruit in new leaders? So when you bring somebody in, there's nothing more frustrating than someone who's gone to a lot of effort to recruit you to do something, and then you show up and it's like your presence didn't even matter. So how do we make sure that someone's presence matters the first time they come into our organization? And in the example I just used about Georgette, sometimes I think one of the best ways to have someone, come in the very first time and feel like they're included is to give them an entry-level activity. So maybe can they be the person to pass out, the agenda, or to, give people name tags, or to sign people up at the registration table. And while we often think about those things as that would be a staff job, or that would be someone who's been around longer, I think, for someone who doesn't know anybody to actually be the greeter and actually be the person, who gets to welcome people, that's such an exciting thing for them, because otherwise they're going to feel lost and alone. And so why don't you, having an opportunity for them to actually be in a place where they can meet people and feel included is sometimes one of the best things that you can do for brand new leaders. So as part of using this planning, action, reflection cycle, then you also need to be thinking about what is our plan for rising leaders, for people who may have been around a little bit and now you're kind of moving them up. And so I think it is this combination of what leadership roles do they want to take on. So in the reflection time, making sure that you have a space to really talk with them about, okay, how did that feel? What did you learn? What else would you like to do around this organization? How else could you be a leader? As Jimmy just said, making sure that they get to go out and be doing one-on-one meetings with other leaders. But then they move in from not just being the person who's doing, and doing the work of the organization, but also going out and recruiting new leaders and doing some of the organizing as well. And then finally, I think this whole idea of what gifts and talents do you see in them that they may not see in themselves. So I think oftentimes our job as staff or organizers is to really be able to help identify that people have some gifts and talents, that they may never feel like that they can lead a conversation in a one-on-one meeting, but they may feel like they're the most introverted person in the world. And I always say that introverts are some of the best organizers out there because you listen well. And you really are able to sit back and have that space. And so I say to people, it's just about asking a couple questions and listening to people's stories. You can do that, right? I think that really making sure that we're able to, have that plan and then ultimately have a plan for skills development. So what skills could they develop through this work? What ways do they want to grow as a leader? And making sure that they're, that this is, again, going back to their own self-interest, that they may really want to learn how to become a public speaker. So how do you give them a chance to do that if that's possible at all? I think in some ways, when I talked about the graphic designer who's retired, maybe they want to use their graphic design skills to help you design your new flyer. Maybe they don't ever want to use their graphic design skills again, but they are really musical, and they've always wanted to, find a place to, use their, play the guitar and provide some music. So, making sure, this is again why we just have conversations with folks to see how do they want to grow and be connected to our work. So finally, this whole idea of both, meeting people's self-interest, finding out what people's self-interest is, and developing leadership, ultimately that is what helps people stay around. But when we think about retention and wanting people to stick with our organization, that if people feel fulfilled, they're going to stay. And the only way to make sure that people feel fulfilled is that if you actually help people figure out, what do I want to do, and then how do I live that out? How can I live out my self-interest, and how can that help meet the needs of our organization? We don't want people burning out, and if people are, again, just feeling like, I've just got to be selfless, I got to gosh, I just got to do this because it's what the organization needs, without realizing there's a piece of them that is attached to this work, they're going to burn out. But that ultimately we want to make sure that we are building a healthy community so that people feel like, you know what, I'm part of this community, I'm connected, and frankly, I'm having fun. Because if folks aren't having fun, that's sort of, that at the end of the day, we can be doing all the work to change the world, but we need to make sure that people are still having fun and being enjoying being part of the community. So at this point, I want to just briefly open it back up again. If there's anybody else who wants to share anything, or if any other questions have emerged at this point. We heard Jimmy mention his story before, and to see if there's any other thoughts around leadership development or recruitment that people would like to share.
Kristen, it's Jimmy again. I had a quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
In talking about reflection and really taking that time to reflect with leaders after the action, as an organizer, do you have specific materials for reflection that you use? Is it just an informal conversation one-on-one that you have? Do you actually have an organizer sit down with the leader and fill out an evaluation form of a meeting, or both?
Yes, both. I mean, I have a couple forms I've used over the years, and then I mostly just tailor it to the actual experience. So, sometimes, I think, most of us don't have the time to sit down with a leader after every single, event or every single action. So
Sure.
Sometimes, I'll do it, after 2 months or, 3 months, and so sort of, then it is a mix of sort of debriefing what they've been doing, but then I usually have some traditional questions that really are about, what have they learned, what have they noticed about the organization, what have they been excited about, what have they been frustrated about, and then where do they think we should go? And I think sort of that getting their opinion about the direction of the organization, and then where they fit in with that, what would they like to do next, how would they like to be involved, where do they see their role. I think that often some of those questions are the ones I find, most elicit the kind of information that would help me figure out with them, okay, then this is maybe we could send you in this direction to work with us as a leader.
Sure.
Kristen, I have one question that popped up in the chat that I wanted to just draw your attention to for a few minutes, which I've also found in my own experience that sometimes people want to get very involved, but they shy away from being titled a leader because they sometimes fear it means too much responsibility. And do you have suggestions of other words or language, or perhaps you, Tom, might have some as well that you could recommend?
Right, great. That's a great question. I think there's two parts to this. I think one, I mean, obviously whatever language works best in your organization. And so I think if it could, if leader does feel too strong, I mean, I think I've seen, again, depending on the structure of the organization, it could be team builder, team player. I mean, I think there's different words that might work, but I ultimately think what people shy away from is if there's sort of this nebulous idea about what leader means. And so I think the more clearly that right from the beginning it can be sort of what the ask is, what the invitation is. So we'd like for you to do this for this event, or we're going to be doing three retreats over the next year. And we're out of those retreats, we're going to ask you to do 2 one-on-one meetings, or whatever that is. That you're developing, in what someone will be actually doing as a leader. I think making that clear helps people then feel like, okay, and then the whole organization isn't resting on me. So it's not like I have to, at the end of the day, like I have to help raise all this money, or I'm the one who makes the final decision. And if they are the ones who are going to make the final decision, or they have to raise a lot of money, making that clear too, but also making it seem manageable. And so I think I know that for you all and the work that you're doing, I know the word ambassador has been one that many of you have used, which I think is really interesting. I think that how is this person going out and sort of taking the message of the organization, of the work, to the world and to other people. And so thinking about I mean, you could say we're going to develop you as an ambassador. We want to help develop your skills. We want you to be the best that you can be in this work. And then maybe you don't necessarily need to use the word leader every time. I think for the sake of time, we're going to move on to this next part with Tom. If other folks have other questions, I mean, you can reach me through Celeste and Karen. I'm happy to answer any specific questions or, to be a resource to you as you continue on your work. But really excited about what you all are doing, and good luck with that.
Thank you, Kristen.
Hi, everybody. This is Tom again. First of all, I'd like to say that what Kristen has just laid out for you all, this basic process of looking at self-interest, of making an ask, getting the commitment, listening and particularly listening to the stories that people have, and setting up the one-on-one meetings. If you follow that basic process, in addition to the more detailed aspects of that Kristen talked about, you'll be very successful in recruiting older adult volunteers for your programs, because those are some of the key interests that they have. And when you look at the age cohort that's turning 60 and 65 today, referred to as the boomer population, self-interest is something that drives them. So if you can really have a conversation with them about that, you'll be ahead of the game. I'm going to briefly go over some of the outcomes of our demonstrations and research that hopefully will help you in recruiting older adults for your programs. The first thing to realize is that demographically the world is changing very dramatically. And every community and every institution within your communities are going to change as a result of the demographic shift. So what you see on the screen are 2 references, one from AARP, one from the Harvard School of Public Health, about the fact that people are getting older, that there are large numbers of them. There will be 74 million of them by the time we reach 2030. And not only are they huge in terms of an age cohort, they are also healthier, more vigorous, better educated, better trained, more experienced than any age cohort that has turned 60 and 65 that the world has ever known. So demographic shift is something that's going to influence and affect everybody. And the longevity revolution, how long everybody's living, is going to affect communities as we move forward. And one of the ways I like to think about this is sort of the supply and the demand side. The supply side are the individuals. And we know a lot about that supply side because there have been, volunteering is as old as the country. It goes back to the early days when people saw something that needed to be done. They came together, they formed a committee, a group, organized an effort and met a need. Over the course of years, there are many organizations that work on this supply side of developing the older adult population. You can just refer to AARP and its 38 million members. They can do a targeted zip code request to members in any zip code in the country, and it produces great results in terms of recruitment. There's also the Retired and Senior Volunteer Program, probably in many, if not all, of your communities. There's also volunteer centers across the country. There's online systems like Volunteer Match and others. The supply side is pretty well fixed. What we did in our research, based on prior research that we've done, is focus on the demand side. Namely, what is it that organizations are asking these older adults to do? And what we found is that there's a huge gap between the interests and capabilities of older adults and what organizations tend to ask them to do, how they think about them, and how they tend to use them. So what we focused on was how do we get organizations and organizational leaders to really understand and prepare to invest in developing the social capital of this huge reservoir of undertapped, underutilized talent that is growing at 9,000 a day every day. So our research was looking at what organizations need to do, and that's the demand side of the equation. We asked some basic questions. Basic questions that we ask of the community-based organizations that we were working with as community partners was, can adults 55 performing professional level, leadership level roles contribute significantly to increasing the capacity of the nonprofit organizations? The answer to that was just an astounding yes. Once those types of volunteers were placed in the right kind of roles in those organizations, they had a tremendous influence and impact throughout the organization, up and down the organization and across the organization. Second question we asked was, does the value of these volunteers does the value that they add justify the investment? And again, the result was an astounding and resounding yes. The value added is quite phenomenal, actually. And then we asked the question, who knows and who determines what this value is, and is there any standard measures that can really help anyone calculate that value? And we found that no, there isn't. And despite the fact that you have a Corporation for National Service and you have a government accounting office, and these folks are supposed to be looking at these kinds of issues, the value of service, from AmeriCorps or Vista or older adults, the reality is that no system existed. So we decided that we were going to dive into this aspect and look at this issue and see if we can determine what the return on investment was for organizations. And so we developed a SMART system. It's called Strategic Metrics and Results Tracking. We hope that system will become available to nonprofit organizations across the country in the months to come, and that they will use that to be able to justify to their funders and to their boards of directors and to whomever that, in fact, an investment in developing older adult volunteers or volunteers of any kind and using them in capacity building roles within the organization really produces a return on investment. We'll talk a little bit more about that later specifically. But you know what we found is that not every organization is ready. In fact, what we found was that many organizations are doing quite well on the diversity front, reaching out to diverse communities and involving members from diverse communities in their organizations and effort. But what we found was that organizations weren't even thinking about aging. They weren't even thinking about this demographic change that's occurring, this longevity revolution that's occurring. And so what we found is that what it takes to get organizations ready is to really look at two things. You've got to look at the mindset, the attitudes, and the culture in the part of the organization. And on the other side, you need to take specific actions and use certain approaches to make this work. So drilling down on the mindset, attitudes, and culture side of things, the first thing is that, do you really believe that this older adult population is a strategic asset and resource for your organization? It really is, but you need to step back and think about that, because until you see that the aging of America, the maturing of America, however you want to talk about it, is in fact an asset to be tapped, you're not going to get very far in moving forward. So you got to look at aging not only from the downside of what we know, that yes, people age, they become frail and vulnerable, they get sick, they have chronic disease. That's the medical model, the decline in death. The reality is that as people remain healthy longer, 20 to 30 years after normal child rearing and work life, you know, these healthy older adults have tremendous amounts to offer to all of you. And I would submit that by looking at that and considering it as a strategic resource, you will reap huge benefit. Program design, again, I would refer back to what Kristen has said. If you follow that design, you will have much more success. Fact is, the self-interest of these older adults is that they do want to do meaningful work in community. Principally, they want to master what it is that they have done in their lives, continue to master it. They want to master new skills. So mastery is something that drives them, ability to learn and continue to learn. They're also interested in purpose. They want meaning. They want to find out, you know, what their contribution is, in fact, meaning to the communities. So you have to be really clear with them in those one-to-one conversations that, you know, your organization is, in fact, doing something in the community, getting something done, it's valued by the community, etc. They're also interested in really making a difference. And so you have to show them and talk to them and tell them that they are making a difference in their community. Why are they there? What difference are they making? Important. And lastly, again, following on the points that Kristen made about basic organizing techniques and strategy, leadership development, is relationship. Everything that underpins what the boomers want is about relationship. So if you build your program design based on those qualities, you will have success. Again, the organizing model presents an open communication style, and the boomers want to have influence. They want to make sure that they have input into what gets done and how it gets done. They have a lot of opinions, very strong opinions, and you have to be ready to communicate with them very openly. The role of the organization is to keep them focused on the mission, keep them within the boundaries of what you're trying to do in the program. But other than that, you need to engage them actively in your organization. So it's a learning environment. And again, the one-on-one conversations and keeping those relationships going creates an environment where everybody's a teacher and everybody's a learner. And that's important for your staffs, because a lot of these people will have, you know, many years of experience, higher levels of training and skills than many of the staff people. Staff cannot be afraid of that. Staff have to be informed to embrace that these are colleagues, these are co-conspirators, they are collaborators, they are counterparts, however you want to say it. Collaborative action is important. Any organization worth its salt knows that it can't do it alone. And so what we found in developing this older adult resource, that those organizations that were most successful were organizations that really developed strategic partnerships. And they weren't informal, they were formal. They were written down so that everybody agreed what the mutual benefit was and what the accomplishments were. So I was sort of referred to this before, but the staff-volunteer relationships are critical. And so before you even begin to bring a lot of older adults into your organization, you have to prepare the staff for the changes that they're going to have. Because in fact, these older adults are transformational within your organization. They will add a tremendous lot, but they also have demands and requirements, and they will insist that you meet them. And so this staff-volunteer relationship has to be prepared for a much more dynamic, interactive, energized group of people. What we found is that teams is a very wonderful approach to getting things done. We'll talk about teams a little bit more, so I'm not going to go into that too much more. But again, the volunteer roles, not only the program design and what you do, but it's the roles. If your expectations are low, then you will stick with a sort of, traditional, mindset of volunteering that exists. You will not be able to raise it to a new level where you will get people really energized and engaged and committed and passionate about what it is that you're doing. So some of the new things you need to take as an organization to get ready is we've beginning to develop a readiness assessment for organizations so that you can determine whether you're ready to embrace this population and bring it into your organization. Before you bring them in, you need to have a strategy for looking at your culture and changing the culture and adding new elements and dimensions to your culture. There has to be buy-in at every level. So it takes a lot of preparation and discussion, from the boardroom to the boiler room. Kristen talked about the recruiting and the messages. Message is important. Don't call them seniors. Don't call them older adults. Talk to them as individuals, as people. The messaging needs to be about the issue, the need that needs to get done in the community, what your organization is doing, why it's doing it, why it's important to the community, why it's going to make a difference. Those volunteer roles need to be directly related to the mission of the organization. It needs to build on that mission. It needs to build the capacity of the organization to fulfill that mission. And so there may be some new leadership changes, some new management processes, because you're going to have a much more open process. These people are going to want to influence. They're going to want to have the ability to question. They're going to raise some hard questions, and it's good if everybody can join together to answer those questions together. And again, since mastery is important to them, training to optimize their knowledge, share their expertise, let them come together in support groups to support one another, help them help staff through the transition and the process. They're able to do that. And again, community partnerships is very important. So I'm going to move on because of time. I mentioned the SMART tool, and what it is a return on investment. There are two aspects to it I want to point out. One is everything I've said about what you need to do to drill down on your organization comes out of the research we've done about what it took to really make this resource successful for organizations. So the organizational culture, characteristics, etc. But the other thing we did is we were looking at all the costs. And when we looked at the costs, what we found across the 44 organizations, 22 control groups that didn't receive any money, 22 organizations that participated, the average return on investment was 8-to-1. And I would challenge any of you to find anywhere in your community where if you make an investment of $1,000, you can almost guarantee $8,000 return. We did this because you need to develop a compelling, convincing argument for your organizations and your communities to develop this resource. And again, I mentioned teams. Of the 70% of the pilot organizations where they developed teams of people exhibited a higher return on investment. The teams are important in another reason. If you truly believe that this population is best educated, healthiest, most vigorous, most experienced the world's ever known, then they really don't need a whole lot of hand-holding. So in fact, they will self-organize, they will self-lead, they will self-direct. And again, the challenge of the organization is just to keep them aligned with the mission, focused on the tasks that need to be done, that you mutually agree with them, and then let them have at it. And you'll be surprised at what they do. So the power of teams is critical. It's much more efficient as well. Rather than developing a position description, recruiting a person, if you develop a team that's focused on solving an issue or a need in a community, what you're going to find is there's a broad array of roles. So when you talk to people in your one-to-one sessions and you make an ask of them, you have some options for them. And some people will be reticent, want to take those entry-level roles that Kristen was talking about. But they'll move through a series of roles and move into leadership. That's what we've seen through this. Where organizations take this seriously and do it right, what they end up with is a very highly energized, passionate, highly committed group of people that, in fact, provide much more intensive commitment to their organization. So we're looking to the future, look at Wisdom Works. That's how we've sort of categorized all of the learning. Wisdom Works is a self-directed team model that we're happy to share with NCRC and you all moving forward. And just to give you some evidence of this, as these teams developed, as these skilled volunteers developed, as organizational capacity grew, there was just an incredible skyrocket in the numbers of volunteers engaged. And we're not talking about episodic or days of service. We're talking about 1,200 committed volunteers who are really helping you as an organization fulfill your mission, okay? And where we are right now in the development of all of this is that all of this learning is being consolidated through a technical resource center that the Administration on Aging is funding, and so we hope to develop online systems, training, links, listservs, what have you, to get this information out to the broader community, and we hope that you in your organizing capacity will be the early adopters, not the laggers on this one. So thank you for your time and effort. So I know it's a lot very quickly, but it's important that you realize that the aging of America is changing your communities. And you need to understand those changes, and by understanding those changes, you'll find that there is an undervalued, untapped resource that's readily available to help you get more things done more quickly. Thank you.
Hi, Velva, Minneapolis. I was just wanting to let you know that all of this information is going to be very helpful for me, and I appreciate it and looking forward to the next conference for more info.
Great, Velva. Great to have you on the call. Anyone else?
No, I'm good.
Well,
I'm good as well.
NCRC, we extend our sincere thanks to Kristen and Tom for joining us on this webinar today. If you are not a member of NCRC, we would encourage you to become a member. Our regional organizers will be following up with you afterwards. This is a little freebie if you're not a member. But you can see some of the member benefits that are available to the National Neighbor Silver Program and our NCRC members. So we would love to have you be a member of NCRC. Also, stay posted. Our next RFP for funding 5 more organizations as National Neighbor Silver sites will be released in September. So if you have signed up on this webinar, we have your email address, and we'll keep you informed through our National Neighbor Silver newsletter. And also stay posted for our next webinar training, which will have to do with holistic aging in place strategies in your community. That'll be taking place in late August, and we will put the date information about that webinar out through the newsletter as well. But thanks for joining this. I hope this was informative for you. If you have any questions that you would like to field to Tom or Kristen, please email me. Or if you have any follow-up questions or feedback, please get in touch with me or Karen. And thanks for joining.